All right, final game.
The final game is a game called Animal Kingdoms. Now, this is by Stephen Aramini, who did Sprawlopolis, Circle the Wagon, so some of those button shy, really popular button shy games, as well as the most recent Flip Town Kickstarter that we were talking about in Backchat, the most recent Backchat, which reminded me of this game. This is Animal Kingdoms, I think I've said that already, and this was originally taught to me at Dice Tower West by Monique and Naveen. They have a great playthrough video from a couple of years ago. We'll link to that below, so check that out if you want a full playthrough.
It's how I also learned the game, because I wasn't there at the time where you got taught the game. Where was I? Was I at Katy Perry?
You're probably
I was at a concert.
Yes,
but then I was like, I also want to learn from Monique and Naveen, and so Amy was asleep. I just watched the video. I learned from them as well.
Anyway, so Animal Kingdoms is a really interesting game in which you're going to have beasts, which are cards, different suits of cards that are going to be dealt to you. But what's really interesting about this game is it is really about area majority. But the way that you're going to get those area majorities is by playing cards down into different areas in the board. I think there's 5 of them, isn't there? Yeah, so there's 5 segments of the board, and each of these segments are going to have a different condition placed on you so that you can't play a card there unless it meets this condition. So it might be something simple, like the card can only be numbered 1, 2, or 3, or the card can only be these 4 different suits of beasts. That's all that can go here. Or it could be something more interesting, like you have to place in here odd, then even, then odd, then even. Or it might reference the neighboring segments and say, well, it has to be the same number as the most recently played card in either neighboring segment. And what's interesting about this game is that those are constantly changing throughout the rounds of the game. So in the first round, you'll have 5 segments with 5 conditions, and you're each going to be playing cards down one at a time, basically putting one card down where you can. But when you put a card down, you get to take one of your tokens and add it into the area majority game for that segment. And the person who has the most control of that segment at the end of the round is going to be able to take the scoring token and score usually quite a significant number of points. So you're not only thinking, where can I play out of these 5 segments, but also what's the best order to do so in order to get majority in these different areas? Or do I want to hedge my bets and go multiple places, or really focus and ensure that I can take control of this area? Now, there are some additional layers to the game. One is that you're kind of building up in a pyramid shape, in that you have to start from below and work your way up in the area majority game. The last person to place a token basically will secure an ongoing token in that segment for the rest of the game. So the final, if I do that in the first round, then for the final 2 rounds, I'm going to have a permanent presence in that segment, which means that in the second and third round, it's going to be easier to get majority in that segment. So that's the first interesting thing. The second interesting thing is that if I was to take that final spot, it would mean that I am no longer able to be active in that round. So even though it's tempting to take that spot, it also means you can't get any presence anywhere else on the board. And so you really have to time it correctly. And on top of that, if you do decide to go out in this game, so just either you stop playing or you can't play, or you take one of those top spots, you're going to get an early exit point bonus as well. And so timing when you stop playing is a really interesting component of this game. When you move into the next round, those conditions for each of the segments change. So the game changes in quite a significant way, and it's really interesting when those change. And then you do a third round, and then you will tally up the points, and basically you'll be
whereas the
victorious,
most points wins.
As usual, most points wins. But what I really enjoy about the game, and I think what makes it really unique, is first of all playing cards in area majority. That's a really fun combination of things. But the conditions that change, I think that is my favorite part of the game, because there's so many that come in this game that every game is kind of different. Actually, every round in every game feels really different, and I really like that.
It's quite a deck of options. So it does keep it, and they're all fairly straightforward, but it does keep it feeling fresh in terms of like, what's a challenge this time and what's a challenge this round.
Yeah, and so I played this at Dice Tower West and I had to get a copy of it. I've still been thinking about it ever since, and so I recently picked this up because it's another great one to have on hand if it plays up to 5 players, and it's a fairly simple game, very simple game to teach. And it's just really easy to get to the table, and it's hard to find a game that plays 5 players like that. So really, really interesting game. I really enjoyed this design.
I really enjoy, and I loved I think the layers, because it's something that it's light and easy to teach, but it's a little bit, it's a little bit crunchy, and there's that element of interaction in the sense of like, oh no, you're coming into my area control, and like, so yeah, quite a nice little spot that it would fit.
Yes, but I was going to caveat my review and say that I enjoyed it much better at a higher player count. At a 2-player count, like any area majority, it really does suffer from like kind of watching multiple players and sussing out the game state and making your best optimal move. It's still interesting at 2 players, but this is a game that I'd get to the table if we've got 4 or 5 players. I think that's where it would really shine.
Yeah.
Where, you're competing over very few spots actually. Yeah. And, the people are playing so many cards that by the time it comes around to you, you might not have a good card anymore.
So different as well.
And so more of the game was in flux, which I really kind of enjoyed when I played it at Dice Tower West. Yeah. You also played it solo.
I did. It's an interesting solo because again, okay, so I'll say that this game, I found it engaging, but it's still very abstract. It's not, something that you're like, oh, I'm doing this thematically. It's like, no, you're just playing number cards and suits and according to different things, and then trying to get that area majority. But in the solo, the implementation of it is it's interesting because obviously you've got your same hand of 4 cards. You always kind of take your turn the regular way that you would. But then the solo has this thing where it sort of reveals a card. And if the card is a rank or the number 1, 2, or 3, it's going to automatically just go wherever you just went. And if it's a 4 through to 8, then it's going to go in like the different regions, because the regions go from 4 spots in this, it's like 4, 5, 6 through to 8. So you know exactly which region it's automatically going to go into, and it doesn't have to meet the conditions that usually would go into that. But it's adding cards, and it is relentless, because then there's also this bonus card that sits next to it, that if for whatever reason the card that you show for your like automa or your AI happens to match in number or beast, then both cards get placed, and so all of a sudden this other opponent is like their area control is just going crazy, and you're like, I don't even feel like I have a moment to breathe here, or like you're kind of trying to get majority somewhere, or you pull out those 1, 2, and 3s, which means that then they're coming for you there as well. So I thought it was a really interesting, fairly easy implementation, but it just made for a very, very challenging solo mode in terms of kind of going, how do I beat this? How do I get you off me? Kind of thing. So I thought it was an interesting one. I think obviously very different experience, because it's more trying to replicate the 2-player experience, which feels very like almost like tug of wars, like you go, I go, you go, I go. Very different to that what I imagine. I haven't played it in the higher player counts like you did, what that would feel like. But I think, in terms of like spending a good amount of time just having that mental puzzle in there, might as well. Because it's fairly abstract, it's not the one that I would choose to play solo. But yeah, interesting implementation. I was impressed with how like, come on, like how many times I was like, just give me a break. Like, yeah, in a good way.
Yeah. But this will definitely, obviously, be staying in our collection. I really enjoy it. I think it's a great group game, one that's really easy to teach and really satisfying and competitive, which is what we love. So that is Animal Kingdoms. And that is all the games we have for you with our new format of 3 games.
3 good spotlight.
3 good games. Good, solid choices. Thank you so much for watching, as always. Hope you enjoyed this episode of Small Talk. If you have any feedback for us, please drop it in the comments below, or if you have an IAQ, please let us know, and we will answer that in an upcoming episode. We hope you have a wonderful week ahead. Happy Monday. We'll be back with more content soon, but bye for now.
Bye.